I sometimes read the advice columnists in the newspaper. I don't know why. Morbid curiosity, maybe. But the problems that people present there interest me, and life's sticky. There's lots of problems out there. We use our best judgment. We ask for counsel sometimes from people we think are wise. We ask God, of course, for guidance. Sometimes we just make a wild guess, or we just grit our teeth and bear it. And no matter how bad your situation is, no matter might be how bad your job is, there are people who have things worse than you do, and you kind of know that, right? I mean, I came across this picture. Here's a lunch break. Somehow I don't think I want that job, personally. I get kind of nauseous just looking at it. But look at those guys having lunch, lining up there. Don't drop anything. This was, of course, about 100 years ago, it looks like. Anyway. My brother and I were having a gourmet meal at Lake Otis McDonald's. And I got up to refill my drink, which I don't have to do often because I have saved 13 42-ounce cups. No longer available in Alaska because they're stupid up here. You can get them in California. But no, I mean, California's smarter than us. They're just really strange. Anyway, so I saved them. I have 13 of them, and I scrounge lids wherever I can. Off the floor of the movie theater. You can steam clean them. Anyway, so when I got back from refilling my drink, my brother was reading a Tim Tebow article in the sports page of the newspaper, like everybody else. McDonald's has about 6 or 7 papers that they've delivered to the restaurant every day, and they put them in these racks, and people take them and read them and put them back, theoretically. Anyway, he got up for some reason, I can't remember, and I just grabbed the paper he was reading and looked at it to see what he was reading, and I saw the advice columnist, Ask Amy. She is Amy Dickinson. She's the kind of left of center politically and socially, replacement for Ann Landers. And I think her advice is a little squishy because it's not solid. It's kind of whatever the mores of the culture is the advice that she gives. And it bothers me sometimes. I think there's no truth there, and the culture has lost sight of what truth is. And her marriage has ended in divorce, as did that of Ann Landers, whom she replaced. And it's interesting that advice columnists have a bad history of bad results with marriages, which doesn't stop them from giving marriage advice. And then Ann Landers, you know, and these are not their real names, you realize, her sister was Dear Abby, and they were estranged from each other throughout most of their adult lives. And she's advising people on how to get along with their family. So all of that kind of amuses me. But it was Ann Landers, by the way, who told us and changed the culture. She said, don't throw milled rice at people at weddings as they depart. Because, remember, birds eat them and they explode, which I think would be fascinating. That's the Calvin part of me. Okay, I can't help that. I'm just kind of curious as to whether that would work. In fact, it doesn't work. It's complete nonsense. Birds are better designed than that. They can eat all the rice they want. There's nothing that will not cause them to die. And even though we now throw bird seed, which I guess makes some sense. I mean, that is what we're leaving it for, really. But she was wrong, and yet she changed our culture. Anyway, Amy Dickinson is part of this tradition, and I picked up her column, and I noticed that a McDonald's patron had read it before me. And he wrote little pithy pieces of advice at the end of every... And I'm going to share some of it with you in a minute. Let's go to Genesis chapter 47, verse 13. Now there was no food in all the land because the famine was very severe, so that the land of Egypt and the land of Canaan languished because of the famine. Joseph gathered all the money that was found in the land of Egypt and in the land of Canaan for the grain which they bought, and Joseph brought the money into Pharaoh's house. Now the guess from people who have studied this is that we're probably in about the 5th year of the famine, 5th or 6th year of the famine at this point. I don't know for sure, no one knows for sure, but I will show you in a little bit why they think so. And anyway, let's reset the scene because it's been a little while since we've been in Genesis. Remember, Joseph was in charge of the plan to gather grain during the 7 good years, in fact 7 terrific years that Egypt had, to store it, to make it available during the famine, and then he was in charge of administrating it, selling it, etc., to the people who needed it. And this made him very powerful in Egypt, and second only to the Pharaoh himself. He was therefore, at least in this part of what the world that we know about, not Asia, of course, no one knew what was going on in Asia at this time, but he would have been in that part of the world the second most powerful man in the world. Anyway, I think what Joseph did during the 7 good years is he bought 20% of the crop from the people at good prices, because crop was very good. And when there's a lot of something, prices go down, right? So he paid less for it than he normally would have to, and he stored it in great storehouses throughout the country. It was abundant. Now, if you assume that the harvest was super good, and the Bible suggests that it was, we don't know how good, it could have been 10-fold or 20-fold greater, or if it was even 5 times greater than normal, then he would have been storing an equivalent of a year's worth of grain in a normal year in those storehouses, okay? So he had 7 years' worth of grain during a normal year. And now the famine came. And I think he's selling the grain, of course. It's obvious that he is if you read the story. But I doubt that he's making a tremendous profit. He's making a small profit. That would be good business, and the king would expect him to do that, and all that money goes back to the king. But eventually, there wasn't any money left. There was none in Egypt. There was none in Canaan. And even with all the dire warnings that the Egyptians had been given about the coming famine, none of them seems to have prepared for it. Notice that? No savings. Nobody had enough grain. They ran out. Joseph did it for them. It's a good thing. And so here's a piece of advice. This is a message about pieces of advice. I'm giving you advice. I'm being an advice columnist today. And here's one for you. Try not to spend everything you earn. That's good advice even when you don't know there's a famine coming. And I know there are some people whose income is such that they live right on the edge and they can't save anything. And I understand that, and that's different. But most of us, of course, we spend too much money, and so that's why we end up in the trouble that we're in. Dave Ramsey says this, and this is good advice. He said, when you're paying your bills, pay yourself. And what he means by that is put some in savings. Save some of it. Pay you. And I use automatic bill pay, which is... It'll ask you, they have that automatic bill. Everyone probably does in most banks, but I just use theirs. And I make a check out to savings for me. It's automatic. It happens every month. And it helps. Of course, I know it's there. All I'm really saying is save some of it. That's all that Joseph did, and notice how well it worked for the nation. Genesis chapter 37, verse 15. When the money was all spent in the land of Egypt and in the land of Canaan, all the Egyptians came to Joseph and said, give us food, for why should we die in your presence? For our money is gone. And then Joseph said, give up your livestock. I'll give you food for your livestock after your money is gone. So they brought their livestock to Joseph, and Joseph gave them food in exchange for the horses and the flocks and the herds and the donkeys, and he fed them with food in exchange for all their livestock that year. What happened, of course, is that once the money was gone, the people came to Joseph and asked him for advice. All right, we're out of money. We're dying here. We could use some food. What do you think we should do? How can we get grain? We have no way to pay for it. And he said, well, sell your livestock not to him. Joseph doesn't personally profit from any of this. Keep this in mind, because you will read, if you do read commentaries, and I'm sorry if you do. But if you do, you'll find some people who take issue with Joseph here. But this is not for him. The Pharaoh is the one who gets the livestock. Joseph is criticized as if he took advantage of these people. That's as if he schemed all of this. And actually he is. He's accused of having manipulated this whole thing. He's evil. He was sitting in a dungeon, of course, because that was part of his evil plan. And while he was in the evil dungeon, he schemed to himself, I shall give the Pharaoh a dream. How do you do that? I don't know. And I will interpret the dream. He will hire me, because kings do that to prisoners in dungeons all the time. And then, while I'm ruling the world, I will manipulate the economy so that they have a famine. And I will buy all their stuff. And soon they will be slaves. That's really the theory. And I can show you the book if you'd like to read it. The thing that he doesn't do, this is kind of a government commentary, I apologize for the political moment that's about to occur, is that he didn't give it away for free like some welfare programs that we know. He allowed them the dignity of paying a fair price for the food. And he offered to buy their livestock for food, and they say, okay. Why? Because it's a blessing to them. Do you understand that he's doing them a favor? They can't afford to feed their livestock. So their livestock's going to die. If he doesn't take the livestock, under government control in this case, and feed it, it vanishes. Egypt becomes impoverished. He was saving the wealth of the kingdom. And I think that he left the animals on the farms of the people who could care for them. The rest, of course, he put it under the care of somebody. He hired somebody. And he provided the feed to keep the cattle and the sheep alive. And you have to admire Joseph for this. He saved enough, and he administrated it so well that he had enough grain to feed the people of Egypt, to feed the livestock of Egypt, to feed the people of Canaan, and to feed the livestock of Canaan. 2 nations. That's incredible. I don't know, by the way, how many Canaanites took advantage of the offer, or even if you made it available to them. But you don't see a hint anywhere in the passage that Joseph or the people felt that they were being cheated by Joseph, or that they had resented his advice. They acted on it, and they are grateful. And I kind of wonder, about the advice columnists. How many people really follow their advice? I mean, I have noted in my career that not too many people follow my advice. And I really don't mind, because if my advice was good advice, then I get to say, see, I told you so, which makes me feel good. And then, not really. If my advice was bad and they didn't follow it, I'm relieved. So, that doesn't bother me. But I want to share my examples I found at McDonald's and talk about them for a second. Dear Amy, as I looked around my home post-holiday, I realized that every aspect of Christmas is my own handiwork. The gifts, the decorations, the meals, the baking, the shopping, the gift wrapping, the menu planning, the Christmas cards, everything. In conversations with friends, I have learned that it is that way in their homes as well. Their husbands love everything about Christmas, especially the baked goods and wonderful meals, but contribute next to nothing to the process. They just show up and indulge themselves while their wives wear themselves out making it happen. If left to the husbands, there would be virtually no Christmas. Quite true. And I will explain. As a result, I've just about had it. I am ready to call it quits. I know that this is a popular topic to make light of, but I find it depressing and no longer wish to participate. I have learned, I have shared these feelings with my husband, who sympathizes but makes no effort to step up to the plate and share the responsibilities. Any suggestions? Bah humbug. Amy has suggestions. She says, you can figure out how you're going to scale back. You got a whole year to figure it out. Husband obviously doesn't care. Go ahead. You don't have to do all this stuff. Da-da-da-da-da-da. What did the unknown McDonald's commentator have to say? You are an angry blank. Yeah, I laughed too. And I started to think, you really got this nailed, because I can tell you what guys would do if Christmas were up to us. All right, kids, we're having pizza. And, the plastic garbage bags, those are your presents. Okay, and we would have fun. We would be fine. Not that we don't appreciate what others do. I know that they do. And here's the thing you need to understand. And this is the question. This isn't the how question. This woman's asking a how question. How can I get more people involved so that I don't have to do all the work? It's not a how question. It's a why question. Why are you doing it? Are you doing it in order to get appreciation from other people? Are you keeping score? Are you planning to see, how much work did you do? Okay, you did 49, I did 51. Or in her case, 100, you did 0. Is that why you're doing it? If you're doing it to keep score, you will both lose and win every time.